Hello and welcome to another episode of Handloader TV. I'm your host Jeremiah, and in this episode we're continuing on with our series called Propellant Profiles, and we're talking all about propellants. And we have three propellants in front of us today from the Hodgdon CFE line. We have CFE Pistol, CFE 223, and CFE Black. Now these are all different powders, but they do have some common ground. CFE stands for Copper Fouling Eraser, and all three of these powders incorporate that technology in their own way for handgun, centerfire rifle, and things of that nature. It's a great line, and it really kind of established some new technology that now we see being incorporated into other powders in the Hodgdon Winchester lineup, as well as even the Ramshot lineup and a few others. So it's really neat to see that this is kind of the series that kicked off this movement towards copper fouling reducing additives being incorporated into the powder. And one thing that's kind of interesting about the powder itself and this additive is, the additive is inert. I'm not going to say exactly what that additive is, but it's inert, so it doesn't add to the propellant's energetic, which means that it can be safely added without altering the burn rate or the characteristics of the powder, which is really, really neat, and that's why we're seeing it incorporated in other powders. However, this additive does add some weight to the powder, the actual granules there. So as a result, this technology isn't really being incorporated into their older line of powders like Hodgdon H4831 or things of that nature, but you are seeing it added into newer powders. So we're going to go ahead and take a deep dive into the Hodgdon CFE line or family of powders, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun. And it makes sense to have a copper fouling reducer or something like that in the powder, especially if you're a high volume shooter. Think a match shooter, competition shooter, something like that. You're going to greatly reduce the amount of copper fouling buildup in your rifle. And just speaking from personal experience, this seems to work best when you're pushing those loads more towards the max charge weight of things in a given cartridge. Seems almost like the higher the pressure, the better these additives seem to perform, which is great news if you're one of those guys that really likes to get the most performance, the highest velocity in class for a given cartridge. So let's go ahead and dive into that. But before we do, let's talk about some of these firearms that we have on the table before us, give you a little bit of information on our test platforms, and then we'll dive into the powder itself. So we'll go ahead and start out with the handgun that we have here. This is pretty exciting. It's a brand new offering just released from Springfield at the time of this filming. This is a Springfield Echelon 4.0C or compact 9mm Luger. Very nice little gun there. It's got a 4-inch barrel, and the optic on top of there is a Vortex Defender red dot. And big fan of it. In particular, the reset is really nice, so a great test platform for testing out Hodgdon CFE Pistol. Then there's a classic Winchester Post 64 Model 70, chambered in 223 Remington, and it's got a loopholed M8 6x compact scope. I'm a big fan of this rifle. I've carried it extensively. It's actually my go-to saddle gun. It's usually what I throw on the back of the horse when I go out riding in case I see a coyote or something like that. It's nice and short and handy, works really well, and a pretty accurate rifle for its age. Then last but certainly not least, we have a Howa 1500 mini action here. This is a custom built rifle. It's got a Bell & Carlson stock on it. Out there on the end, the 16-inch barrel, 1-in-8 twist. We've got a Texas Silencer Company Hunter model suppressor threaded onto the end there. And to top it off, we've got a Trijicon 5-20x50 powder, and that's what we're going to be using to test Hodgdon CFE Black powder, which was optimized for subsonic loads in the 300 blackout, but it also works very well with supersonics as well, and we're going to test that extensively in this video. Then there's also a couple of other things I'd like to point out on the powder before we go down and look at the burn rate chart and that kind of thing, because these powders, they're kind of niche powders, but they do have some versatility as well. And one thing that's really neat about the copper fouling eraser in each of these products is that It's manufactured right here in the USA. All three of these powders are double base powders, and they're all made in the USA at St. Mark's powder plant in Florida. So I'm a big fan of that. Really like to see Hodgdon supporting United States-based industry, and they really set the bar high with these powders and kind of set a theme. And a lot of this technology of the copper fouling eraser is exclusive to Hodgdon. They have an exclusivity contract with St. Mark's powder that St. Mark's will only produce this temperature stable component for Hodgdon powders, which is really, really neat, and it kind of guarantees that St. Mark's is going to get some good business out of the deal, as well as Hodgdon having an exclusive product with this copper fouling eraser additive. So big fan of that. Let's go ahead and take a look now at the individual powders. We'll talk about their burn rate, and then we'll take an up-close look at them under the microscope. So now we're going to go ahead and pull up a relative burn rate chart, and we're going to take a look at Hodgdon CFE Pistol first. And taking an up-close look at the burn rate chart, we can see that CFE Pistol sits very close to Winchester Autocomp on the fast side of things, and then Ramshot Silhouette on the slow side of things. However, I would say that it's much, much closer to Winchester Autocomp than it is to Ramshot Silhouette. As in a matter of fact, if you take a close analysis at the powder charge weights between CFE Pistol and Autocomp, the charge weights are nearly interchangeable and identical in most cartridges. Not all, but most cartridges. So CFE Pistol is real similar to Autocomp, but it has that proprietary copper fouling eraser additive, that technology that Hodgdon has incorporated into their powders, and we're starting to see it now spread into other lines of powders. And if you continue to watch this series, we're going to be talking about those in a couple of upcoming episodes, so be sure to watch for that. Then we're going to go ahead and take a look at Hodgdon CFE 223 on the relative burn rate chart here. It's a pretty interesting powder. I'm a big fan of this powder. It's great in the 223, and if you look at the burn rate chart, it sits right between Vitivori N540 on the fast side and Alliant Reloader 15.5 on the slow side. And I am a huge fan of both of those powders. The 15.5 is my absolute favorite in the 308 Winchester, as well as several other cartridges. The 22 ARC, great in 6mm ARC. It's very, very good powder, as well as Vitivori N540. And Hodgdon CFE 223 is actually my absolute favorite in the 22 Nosler. I've had some really, really good results with that cartridge, and the 22 ARC and 224 Valkyrie as well. If you have any of those, Hodgdon CFE is a go-to, but it's also very versatile, and it can be used in things like the 375 H&H all the way down to the tiny 17 Remington. So great cartridge, very versatile. Use it quite a bit in 204 Ruger as well. And then we have over here on the other end of the spectrum, we have Hodgdon CFE Black. A really neat powder designed specifically for the 300 blackout. It kind of gets its lineage actually from an old 7.62 by 39 powder. Very common in the AK. CFE Black works very, very well in the AK. Good accuracy, good standard deviations, all those kinds of things, as well as the 300 blackout, which we'll test here in a little bit. As far as where it falls on the burn rate chart, it's right between Accurate LT 30 on the fast side, and then Norma 200, or the more common Accurate 2200 on the slow side. So very, very cool powder here. And I should point out that CFE Black is also my absolute favorite in the 17 Remington Fireball. It offers top-notch velocities in that cartridge with the lightweight bullets. And it actually performs very well in a lot of those smaller varmint style cartridges, smaller caliber, smaller cases. Works very, very well. And I also use it quite a bit in the 375 Stalker, which is essentially a 308 case necked up, shortened to 375 caliber, and it feeds and functions in the AR platform. So that's a fun little wildcat that I tinker with from time to time. So now you kind of know what to expect with the relative burn rates of these powders. Now we're going to go ahead and take a moment, and we'll jump on over to the microscope here, and we'll give you an up-close look at all three of these powders so you can kind of get a feel for what they look like, and we'll talk about some of their chemical characteristics as well. After all, this is a deep dive, and this is what we typically cover in our Propellant Profiles series in the magazine, which currently Rob Baer is writing those articles. They're fantastic. If you haven't checked them out, I highly encourage you to pick up an issue of Handloader magazine on the newsstand or subscribe to it online or the print edition, and you can read all those columns for yourself. Propellant Profiles is a personal favorite of mine, and that's why we make these videos. Anyways, moving on. We have Hodgdon CFE Pistol. It's a double base nitrocellulose and nitroglycerin spherical powder with sort of flattened granules in there. It has a bulk density of 850 grams per cc, and it is a medium shade of gray in color. All in all, it is the only pistol powder on the market that I'm currently aware of that features a copper fouling reducer. So if you shoot a lot of copper-plated bullets or full metal jacket bullets in your handgun, this is an ideal choice, and it flows extremely well in a volumetric type powder measure, which is true for honestly all three of these powders, CFE 223 and CFE Black. They all flow very, very well through a volumetric type powder dispenser, and of course they're great in the electronic throwers as well. Then we'll go ahead and jump on over to Hodgdon CFE 223 here, another double base propellant. It features a flattened spherical powder granules. It's grayish in color and again flows very well through the powder dispensers. And it's great for bulk loading or shooting 223 or 308 thanks to that copper fouling reducer additive. And it's a wonderful, wonderful powder with light bullets in the 308 Winchester. My go-to hunting load in the 308 Winchester uses 130 grain Barnes triple shock X bullet using Hodgdon CFE powder. So you can kind of get an idea and compare looking at the up-close image on the microscope between these three powders. Last but not least here we have Hodgdon CFE Black. It is a unique double base propellant optimized for subsonic loads in the 300 blackout. It's grayish black in color, and it is a true spherical powder. If you look closely at these, you'll see that they're not flattened like the others in this line. It also produces, again, top velocities in the 17 Remington Fireball and other smaller cartridges. So now you can kind of see what these powders look like, what they offer, some of their chemical composition. And now we're going to go ahead and take these rifles along with some select loads that we've just kind of picked based on previous experience. We're going to shoot them on steel. We're not really shooting for accuracy here. We just want to kind of show you what these powders are capable of, how they work in these cartridges, and give you an idea roughly of what you can expect. Then we'll come back to the bench, talk about the numbers, and talk about the load data for these three cartridges as well, and go from there. So let's go ahead and take these guys. We'll hit the range and we'll put them to the test. So we're out on the range now, and according to the Kestrel 5700, the temperature is 40 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity is 25%, pressure is 30.22 when adjusted for elevation, which is 5,000 feet, and the wind is a little bit choppy today. We've got a lot of gusts. Right now it's blowing pretty steady at about 8 to 9 miles an hour from about the 10 o'clock position. And that's just what we're dealing with. We've had some gusts up to 20 miles an hour, so we'll try and avoid shooting when the wind's that choppy. But thankfully today we're not really shooting for accuracy. We're just kind of showing you just a little bit of information and how versatile the Hodgdon CFE line of powders are. And so I've got several rifles and a handgun to showcase that. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we have the brand new Springfield Echelon here that we'll be putting to the test, or using to test our 9mm Luger load using Hodgdon CFE Pistol. This is a 4.0 grain charge with 147 grain Hornady XTP bullet, a personal favorite of mine in the 9mm. Starline cases, CCI 500 primers, and our overall loaded length is 1.130 inches. We've got the steel set up downrange at about 20 yards. Chronograph set up, ready to record velocities. Let's go ahead, settle in, and let's shoot a group on the steel. Very nice. That first shot that went a little bit low, I compensated for that. I was kind of going off the irons, then I swapped over to the red dot on there. Really liking this Vortex Defender ST so far. So good. Nice big window, especially on a compact size handgun like this. It fits nicely, but you still have a nice window to look through, and the dot's pretty clear and crisp, which is something that I kind of struggle with because I got a minor stigmatism in my right eye. But all in all, not too bad. All right, so now we've got my saddle rifle here, the Winchester Model 70 that we talked about back in the studio, benched in, and it's chambered in .223 Remington. We're using a 28.0 grain charge of Hodgdon CFE 223 and a 53 grain Hornady VMAX bullet, CCI 400 primers, and our overall loaded length is 2.258 inches. So I'm a big fan of this bullet and this powder combination. Got the chronograph all set, ready to record our velocities. Let's go ahead and put a group on that steel. Well, as always, this little saddle rifle does not disappoint. There you have it, 5 rounds on the steel with the 223. Let's go ahead and jump on over to the next rifle. So the wind has picked up quite a bit, and it's blowing about 15 to 20 miles per hour currently. Hopefully our mics are cutting through the wind pretty good and you can understand this, but at any rate, we've switched over to our 300 Blackout. This is our Howa 1500 mini action rifle here. We're using a 23.7 grain charge of Hodgdon CFE Black with 110 grain Hornady VMAX bullet, Starline cases, CCI 400 primers, and our overall loaded length is 2.125 inches. This is a personal favorite of mine in the 300 Blackout, both powder and bullet combination, so I'm excited to see how it performs. Let's go ahead and put a group on the steel. Hopefully this rifle is still zeroed for supers. It appears so. I hit a little bit high right there. I'm going to go ahead and adjust for that and hold a little bit low. Definitely some wind factor going on here. A little bit of swing factor and wind factor on that last shot, but all in all, it's a great powder. It's not a bad group on the paper or on the steel considering our circumstances. So let's go ahead and reload this rifle and let's shoot some subsonic loads through the 300 blackout. That's one of the highlights of this powder, is its versatility, especially in the 300 blackout. All right, so we've still got the 300 blackout benched in, but we've swapped our load over to the same powder, Hodgdon CFE black, but this time we're using an 11.5 grain charge with a 225 grain Hornady ELDM. CCI 400 primer, Starline cases, and our overall loaded length is 2.255 inches. I'm a big fan of this bullet. It's a little bit long in the 300 blackout, but as you'll see here, it works very well, especially for subsonic loads. And if you're looking to get the best BC you can with your subsonic loads in the 300, this is a great option. So enough talk though, let's shoot. Weight was still swinging when I sent that one, but all in all, not too shabby. And there is something that is extremely satisfying about hearing that punch of that steel. And when it's done with subsonic loads, especially at long range, it's just all that more satisfying. So we're back at the reloading bench now after doing a bunch of shooting with these rifles in some rather nasty conditions, but we muddled through, and we're going to go ahead and break down the data now. We're going to start out with Hodgdon CFE Pistol in the 9mm Luger, this Springfield Echelon, which was a lot of fun to shoot. The load we went ahead and settled on for this video is using a 4 grain charge of CFE Pistol with 147 grain Hornady XTP bullet, Starline cases, CCI 500 primers there. And taking a look at the numbers here, we got a standard deviation of 5, extreme spread of 16, and an average velocity of 916 feet per second. And if you look at the book load data for this particular bullet and powder and component combination here, the start charge is 3.7 grains, and it goes all the way up to 4.2 grains, which is your maximum charge in the 9mm. Overall, I kind of picked this load because I've shot a ton of 9mm, reloaded even more 9mm, and I knew that this was a good solid load and it'd be a shoe-in. Good standard deviations there, very pleased with that. Then we went ahead and jumped on over to Hodgdon CFE 223 powder in the Winchester Model 70 with the 20-inch carbine length barrel there. A 28 grain charge got us an average velocity of 3,202 feet per second with that 53 grain Hornady VMAX bullet. And if you look at the book data, the charge weights are rather narrow here. Start charge is 27 grains and a maximum charge is 28.5. Standard deviation of 14, extreme spread of 40. Not too bad there. I'm pretty pleased with those results. And quite frankly, if you're loading to 5.56 NATO pressures or you're loading to CIP pressures, you can push this a little bit more with this particular powder and get a little bit higher velocity at the expense of more wear and tear on your barrel and, of course, higher pressures in your rifle. Then we went ahead and swapped on over to our 300 blackout, where we have 2 loads to take a look at. The first one, using obviously Hodgdon CFE black, is supersonic, and it's using a maximum charge weight of 23.7 grains with 110 grain Hornady VMAX bullet. Starline cases there, and we got a standard deviation of just 5.2 and an extreme spread of 16 with an average velocity of 2,250 feet per second. If you look at the book data, the starting charge is 22.5 and the maximum charge is 23.7. However, one really neat thing about CFE black when using supersonic loads with those lighter 110 grain bullets and things like that you pretty much can't go over pressure with it. This is a highly compressed charge at 23.7, and certain cases won't even allow you to fit that much powder in the case. You might have to actually back it off. But if you can fit that powder in the case, CFE black, then chances are you're perfectly fine. If you load it up to 25 grains, I don't think you'd experience pressure signs with this powder and the supersonic loads there. So it's really neat in the 300 blackout. Then we went ahead and switched over to the subsonic side of things with the 300 blackout, which is what makes it fun. It's a very versatile cartridge, and you can shoot those subsonics, which are ideal if you're shooting with a suppressor. An 11.5 grain charge generated an average velocity of 1,138 feet per second. It's right there at the sound barrier. Some of them may have even been supersonic. I can't quite remember now off the top of my head, so I should probably reduce that charge weight just a little bit with that 225 grain Hornady ELDM. But that is the load that is on Hodgdon's, or on our website, and I think Hodgdon's website has an 11.3 grain charge for the subsonic 220 grain bullets there. But all in all, not too bad. I'm pretty pleased with the performance of there, very pleasing on the ears, and you can always tweak those a little bit to look for that magical subsonic number, whatever that is, depending on where you are on the earth, your elevation, and all those things. Generally speaking, 1050 is a good number to shoot for with subsonic loads, but depending on where you are, you can get away with an excess of 1100 feet per second and still remain subsonic. So this is something you really just got to kind of play with and fine-tune it to you and your area, or go err on the side of caution, keep it around that 1050 mark for velocity. Standard deviation of 10.3 with this load is absolutely exceptional in the 300 blackout, and it makes sense. It's kind of to be expected because this powder is optimized for subsonics in the 300 blackout. Fills the case nicely. Good standard deviations are sure to result. So there you have it. There's our load data and our testing that we conducted for this video. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll go ahead and close out this video with a few closing thoughts on the powders themselves. Leaving you guys with some closing thoughts on the Hodgdon CFE family of powders. They not only paved the way for new powders to start adopting this proprietary technology of the copper fouling reducing additive, but they also filled some nice little niches in the Hodgdon lineup. Whether you're the guy who's loading bulk 223 Remington ammunition or bulk 9mm ammunition, or you're that guy that likes to get screaming velocities out of those tiny little varmint cartridges or shoot subsonic rounds at 400 yards, we have a short of this exact rifle doing that with subsonic ammunition at 400 yards clapping steel. And it's just a whole lot of fun. So these powders do fit some really neat niches, as well as offer some more broad range applications. Overall, their performance has been exceptional, and they're definitely staples here in our test procedure and our load development that we do for both the magazine and Handloader TV. I know CFE 223 was in our 308 Winchester load development video. If you watch the load development video featuring this Howa, CFE Black is featured in there as well. So they're all great powders. I've used CFE Pistol extensively, and I have no complaints about any of them. The performance has always been top-notch. And now you know a little bit more about the powders that you might be using or considering to use, and you can make educated decisions about whether it would be right for your application or for what you're doing. So we want to thank you so much for watching this video. We do greatly appreciate it. As always, if you liked what you saw, give us a thumbs up, let us know. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you're notified when we post our next video. We've got more of these in the works, as well as some load development videos and a lot of other fun stuff that I'm looking forward to tinkering with. So thank you so much, and as always, if there's any comments or questions, be sure to leave those in the comment section below. I do read every single one of those, but as the channel's grown with over 25,000 subscribers and countless people watching these, it's a little bit hard to reply to every one of those, but know that I do read those comments without failure, and I do my best to respond to them. So thank you so much, and I will catch you in the next episode.